Peirush Gimel Halacha Yudalim Hilchos Tshuva. Kol echad v'echad me'esrim ve'arba anoshim elo shemaninu. All these 24 different types of people that we mentioned. Al b'shem Yisrael ein lem chayil l'mabo. We go down below the Peirush. Light averos that you don't have a chayil l'mabo. So the Rambam says all these 24 that we mentioned, even though the Yisrael don't have a chayil l'mabo, where are these mentioned earlier? 24. In Halacha Zayin, there's 5. In Halacha Ches, there's 3. So we're up to 8. And 3 Koifrim is 11. Halacha Tes, 2 Mishemodim. And Halacha Yud, Machdi Arabim. One who did by great and large offenses, and others by lesser. And they're considered 2. So you have 15. Halacha Yud Aleph, somebody who separates himself from the Tzibur. Halacha Yud Beis, 2 Moisim, and Halacha Yud Gimel, those who place Metirei Eim al Tzibur, so you have 19. We'll take the 5 that we just, in Halacha Vov, that the Rambam did not explain them. The Koifim B'Tchias HaMeisim, the Koifim B'Tchias HaGadol, those who deny resurrection, Mashiach, those who kill, those who speak Lashon Hara, and those who cover their circumcision. Altogether we have 24. These are the 24 that we're talking about here. There's a Meir cites Rabbeinu Hananel and Tainus 5a. Amam knows Nachman Rav Yitzchak. Hananel said to Rav Yitzchak, what it says in Yirmiyahu, Kishtayim Rois Osurami. Only 2 bad things they did. There's more. There's 24 things she HaKadosh Baruch Hu forgave them. And Rabbeinu Hananel says, and if you make the cheshbon of 24, there are different ways of reckoning them. Rabbeinu Hananel writes, we know from our teachers that these 24 sins, they are mentioned in Talmud Eretz Yisrael, which is the Yerushalmi, in Perek Elu She'enim Chelik Na'abo. And the Hilchos Tshuva cites, this is what the Rambam means when he says that there's 24. It's referring to those 24 which were Kabbalah from the times of Chazal. The Yeshaver is Kalis Me'elu. There are 24 lesser penalties. V'al became, even though they're lighter, here he says Harogel Behen, which means those that are consistently doing them. Therefore, it's better to stay away from them, not because the gravity of the sin, but rather because you do it so often. And so we find Peirush HaMeir, when he explains the 13 Ikrim, that the Koifer doesn't have a Chayil L'Abo, right away he writes, except what's mentioned in the Mishnah, that those who do them do not have a Chayil L'Abo. And the Hamal Mnechaver B'Rabim, and somebody calls to his friend with a nickname, and somebody who makes himself great by the fact that his fellow man has stumbled, because a person shouldn't do this. Only one who is not with a high neshama, he's not complete, and therefore he has no portion in the world to come. So you see that he loses his portion in the world to come, not only because of the gravity of the sins, but because his soul is incomplete, and this is what causes him to do these lighter averos many times, and therefore a person should work to have to uplift his soul. We go to the next Omud. The Meiser Keach on the Rambam, the beginning of the Sefer, he writes that Rabbeinu Avram ben Avram copied something from his father that wasn't written in the Yad HaChazokah. That is, that those who say, those who have these bad attributes have no portion of the world to come, is because the nefesh, which has such a terrible attribute, cannot hope that it will merit having a portion of the world to come. These attributes cause him that he can't change from an Aveira, which will cause him to lose his portion from the world to come. So you see that the reasoning is not only that he won't receive Olam Haba, it's because of these bad habits that he has, and therefore he will not merit the world to come. Just like he says in the Peirush HaMeir. Where do we find in Peirush HaMeir? In Marcus Per Gimel Mishnah Zayin, he writes, from the foundations of belief in Torah is that if a person keeps a mitzvah, for any of the 613 mitzvahs, correctly so, and he has no other purpose behind it, but he did it specifically for the sake of heaven, he merits from this one mitzvah to Chai Olam Haba. Therefore, Rav Hanania says, because of the many mitzvahs, it's not possible that a person should not transgress all of his life from doing something in completeness, and he will have, because of that mitzvah. That's why the Baal Shem Tov also said a person should set aside one mitzvah she does totally so, without any fail. Therefore, the Rambam says here in his wording, very careful wording, that somebody whose soul is not complete cannot look forward to doing something with completeness which will merit him Chaye Olam Haba. Now, the Rambam goes on to say, Ve'elohein, these are averos which are lighter, that if you do them often, if someone does them often, Chas v'Sholom, he doesn't have a Chaye Olam Haba. Machon Nesher HaGadol, somebody who nicknames his friend. V'hakoyel chavero b'kinuyov, he calls his friend with his nickname that he already has. Or he embarrasses his friend in public. Or he has takes glory in the fact that his friend has stumbled. Somebody who embarrasses Talmid Chochem, somebody who embarrasses his teachers, his rebbes. He denigrates the festivals, the machalas kodoshim, and he who desecrates the holy. The Kesef Mishnah cites always. What is Amidoyema? What is Amidoyema? Says the machalas kodoshim. He starts off with the reverse. Going backwards. Which isn't mentioned over here, which means he tries to cover his circumcision. Which is also not mentioned here. He shows a side of the Torah which is not halachic. And he who embarrasses his friends in Rabbim, even though that he has Torah Ma'asim Tovim, he has no Chilek Olam Haba. So we see some of the things are mentioned specifically in the Mishnah, among those things which he has no Chilek Olam Haba. So guess the Mishnah asks a question, where the Rambam get that these are more lenient than the previous ones? How do you know they're not stringent halachas? And maybe it's because they're stringent, not because they're light, and he's only punished because he's customary to do them. In the Mishnah it says they have no Chilek Olam Haba. It doesn't say only because he's used to doing them. And he adds a Baal Lashon Hara who understands the 24 stringent things that are terrible, and the Rambam counts them, are more stringent than those who desecrate the festivals, which is mentioned in the Mishnah, and the Rambam places that among the calories. So where does the Rambam get to differentiate or delineate which are which. We'll go to the next Amud. The Peirush HaMeir explains that the source for the Rambam is in Peirush HaMishnayos, where he says that these Averos Akalos has no Chayil Lambo only because of his soul is not complete. Therefore, it's at one time that wouldn't cause it to happen, because a person can fail once or twice. Only when he does it often does he not have a portion of the world to come. The Peirush HaMeir says in Erchen, in 15b, we find somebody says Loshen Hora is like he denies HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's a very stringent issue. And Chazal were instituted many stringencies to keep away from Loshen Hora, and his intent is what it says in those days. Perek Zayin Halacha Gimel. When somebody says speaks Loshen Hora, it's equivalent to any of the three major sins, which one is not allowed to do, even upon pain of death, which is Avodah Zarah, Gid HaRosh, and Shviras Domim. Somebody says Loshen Hora is like he denies HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And Loshen Hora kills three people: the person who said it, the person who heard it, and the person who was spoken about. Therefore, it's worse than these chatoim, and therefore the Rambam calls everything else Averos Kalos. That's what many of the Achronim explain. Mekeves HaMishnah cites how does the Rambam differentiate? How does the Rambam know that Baal Loshen Hora is worse than somebody who denigrates the festivals? Because the Rishonim disagree if it means he's talking about Yontif, which is the Raisa, or Chol HaMoed. He's talking about the intermediate days. According to many Rishonim, it's only Midrabanan. Thus, Mavazas Amiyadas is talking about it is Rabbanan, and Loshen Hora is the Raisa. It's more stringent. Kesef Mishnah further asks, why the Rambam not mention the person who tries to hide that he's circumcised, which is mentioned in the Mishnah among those things that you don't have a portion to the world to come. And he answers it's possible, meaning that he's not sure about it, that this means Moshe Belosoi, which he did count in Halacha Vov, among the 24 things that a person does not have a portion Lo'elam Haba, and therefore Meifa Brisa Shel Avraham Avinu is different than Moshe Cholosoi. Moshe Cholosoi means he covers up the circumcision, and Meifa Brisa means he does not keep to the morality of Klal Yisrael. So they ask, why does he write it Ve'efsha? He has a good answer. It's possible, he says, that this might be the reason. We find in Hilchos Milo, meaning he did not fulfill circumcision, or he covered it up again surgically. Even so, he has no portion of the world to come, as it's mentioned before. So the Kesef Mishnah also asks, why doesn't he mention Amagal Apon about Torah, that he interprets Torah not correctly? Among those that don't have a Chayil Abo, it's mentioned in the Mishnah, and he answers that in Sanhedrin is a Machlokes of Amoraim, which are the later commentators in the Talmud. If Amagal Apon about Torah, it means somebody who embarrasses Talmidei Chachamim, or it means he embarrasses his friend in front of Talmidei Chachamim. The Rambam therefore interprets Vaz Talmidei Chachamim is referring to this situation, not talking about that he's talking about the Torah itself, because he paskins like Rav Hanina and not like Rabbi Yochanan, Yeshua and Levi, who explain that he embarrasses his friend in front of another Talmid Chacham. And even though that it's a klalu, usually the general rule is Machlokes Rav, Rabbi Yochanan, Halacha Rabbi Yochanan. So why does Rambam take the more lenient approach that it's referring to somebody who embarrasses his friend in front of the Talmidei Chachamim. Still, Rav is like Rav Chanina, because the halacha is like Rav Chanina, even against Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yeshua and Levi. So there are different rules as to who we pass in the halacha to. So usually we pass in like Rabbi Yochanan, but here we have a Chanina, and since we have a Chanina, so maybe we pass in like him. And furthermore, the Rambam paskins the kula that somebody who denigrates his friend in front of Talmidei Chachamim is not called Megalaponim HaTorah, because only if he embarrasses him, the Talmid Chacham himself, that's he's called Megalaponim HaTorah. And people note, with regard to this incident, Halacha Yud Aleph, he writes that if somebody does it with a strong hand, like Yoakim is called Megalaponim HaTorah, and he's among those that do not have a chelik l'olam haba. Thus we find that the Rambam did count the Talmidei Chachamim among the Averos, that somebody who is customary in them has no chelik l'olam haba, because he's Megalaponim HaTorah, which is mentioned in the Mishnah. We'll stop here for this halacha. We'll continue in the next shiur.